Welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors. Dr. Allen chats with successful investors exploring their journey from setback to triumph. Through this window, we glimpse the truths that inspire our guests to invest abundantly and flourish in all areas of life. And now your host, Dr. Allen.
Hello viewers and listeners, welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily investors. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. Not only is today's guest a successful entrepreneur and real estate investor, he is also serving as an active duty naval officer and is currently stationed in Japan. He has spent 3 years on board the USS Albany Submarine and has spent a portion of that time living underwater, which is something most of us will never experience. While serving, he partners with skilled real estate operators and investors across the country to acquire multifamily properties. He hosts his own podcast, Lessons in Real Estate Show. Please welcome Anthony Pinto.
Anthony, we're delighted to have you here. So let's go right on into this. And so first of all,
Absolutely.
Can you share with us what really was it what was the impetus that drew you to becoming an entrepreneur and particularly a multifamily real estate investor? And what was it that, made you decide that actually this is something you would be interested in and something you actually could be successful at?
Sure, absolutely. Alan, well, I appreciate you having me on the show today, to talk about my life, because it really is my life, and how I got into multifamily and really real estate investing in general is probably kind of common to a lot of people. The background maybe not as much, but how I actually got into it is probably common. So background. So like you said, I was on the USS Albany Submarine out of Norfolk, Virginia for about 3 years. We were in shipyard for a lot of that time, the vast majority of that time. And towards the end, we actually went underway and did a number of exercises before I moved on to a shore tour to another shipyard boat that was also in Norfolk. But during those 3 years on the Albany, going onto that boat, I had a very idealistic view of what the Navy was going to be like. I thought I was going to go see the world. I was going to go travel. I was going to experience, things that others of my same age were not going to be able to do, and was really kind of see the world is really what my goal was. And when I found out I was getting stuck in the shipyard, that ended up turning into 28 months of being in a shipyard, was kind of deflated my bubble, if you will, a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
And over time, working long amounts of hours, 12, 14-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week, having duty, being in a 3-section duty rotation where you're standing watch every 3 days, a 24-hour duty schedule, never really getting to see my wife. And that of itself, when we first got married in 2017, September 2017, I had about 1.5 years left on the boat. And our first year of our marriage was like we were roommates. We never really got to see each other. We were passengers in the night almost. And
your wife is also in the Navy. I'm sorry.
She is, yes. Yeah. She is a Navy nurse.
Okay.
So she would be working nights some days, and I would be working days, and we would not see each other because we would leave early or late. And it would be, 2 or 3 days before we would see each other. And even when we were home, it was only maybe a couple hours before I had to go to bed and before I had to get up in the morning. So, that was really kind of the impetus for it, and thinking about, I can't sustain a marriage that way. Right. And that's not even talking about having kids involved. So that was kind of in the back of my mind when I started thinking about, okay, there has to be something more to this life than going underway in a submarine, right? Or spending, god awful amount of hours working this job that I really did not enjoy, right? There wasn't really any part of it that I particularly enjoyed. So I started thinking of other ways to kind of supplement that income. Like, I enjoy the health benefits. I enjoy the income that I was getting from that, but the work life was just not what I wanted. So some other ways that I started looking into this was I just kind of Googled, like side hustles or ways to make money. And I came across Bigger Pockets, and I came across this site called Military Investor Network that is founded by a guy named Stuart Grazier, who is also active duty. He's a pilot that lives out in Colorado.
Mhm.
And I found his Facebook group, and I just started talking with him. And it was like, hey, like, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing with real estate investing, with buying apartments, with, buying these single family homes. I think it's a great opportunity. I just don't know how to get started.
Mhm.
And so he sat me down and we had a conversation, and he was like, hey, you should read these books. You should talk to this guy. He's local to you. He's a really awesome guy. He can really kind of get you set on the right track, especially if you want to pursue this as a long-term kind of career after the Navy. So the two books he set me on were Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which, as you can imagine, is the big purple Bible that a lot of people use and think about when they
Right.
first get started with real estate. And then the second book was Set for Life by Scott Trench. And Scott Trench is now the CEO of Bigger Pockets. He also hosts one of their podcasts as well. And in that book, he talks about concepts that kind of really opened my eyes to the power behind real estate investing, especially as a military investor.
Mhm.
And one of the concepts he brought up was house hacking. And for your listeners that may not know, house hacking is essentially buying an investment property, living in it, and renting out the other rooms or the other units to other individuals to pay for the mortgage and even cash flow some. So that's the idea I wanted to think about, right? And that's what I kind of fell in love with, was this idea of house hacking. And so, I already had a house in Virginia Beach that I lived in, for the 3 years that I was on that boat. And so when I got back from my final underway, which was in November of 2018, the day before Thanksgiving, actually, I walked off the boat, gave my wife a hug, and I told her, hey, we're going to move out of our house, move to this quad in another part of town that was much, much worse than where we're living now.
Mm.
And as you can imagine, that didn't go over too well with the wife. We had built this house together, essentially, well, not physically, but we had put together this house together. We had accumulated furniture. This is where we got married. This is where we had our first dog. This is where we had our second dog. There's a lot of history in this house. And so it was a lot to give up. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to take advantage of my ability to use my VA loan, Veteran Affairs loan. And what that is a 0% down owner occupied home loan that you can get for residential property. And what's special about it is not only the 0% down, but the fact that you can use that loan to buy up to a quad. And a lot of people don't necessarily know that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take advantage of not only being able to house hack, but also to be able to use this VA loan. And I wanted to buy a smaller multifamily property. And so I got off the boat the day before Thanksgiving. The next week after Thanksgiving break, started going to local meetups, met my now real estate agent. And the next week, and then the week after that, we were looking at properties, and we got one under contract about 2 to 3 weeks after getting started in 2018. And we went through the whole rigmarole of contract, went through some headaches with that. The appraisal came back much lower than expected, and we ended up having to pay about $9,000 in closing costs that we were not expecting to pay. Which was kind of a struggle, as you can imagine, to kind of scramble to get all this money together. But long story short, we ended up buying this quad, and we house hacked it for about a year until we moved in December of 2019 to move here to Japan. And during that time, it was an experience. I'll just say that. The house was built in 1900, 120 years old.
Wow.
It was completely vacant when we bought it. So we had to do all the renovations, replace the carpet, redo the kitchens, completely gutted the bathrooms and redid those, and get tenants in there, which was an experience. And I'm fairly handy at least I think I'm fairly handy. And so I thought a lot of these things I could just do myself. And the vast majority I did. But it took a long time, right? It took a long time of us just having to cover the mortgage by ourselves for that property. And eventually we kind of figured it out. We got the units renovated, carpets replaced, all that. We actually used one of the units as an Airbnb because we downsized greatly when we moved to this property into a studio. And so we had double of everything. So we moved that into the Airbnb and used that as an Airbnb for about 6-7 months before we moved into it once our stuff got packed up to move here to Japan. Oh. So long story short, we were able to rent out the other 3 units, get them renovated and rented out. And it's going well there. After we closed on that one in January, we had another one that we closed, a triplex that we found and closed on. But that one I bought through a joint venture with a couple of other Navy guys. And that one's still going well as well. That one is about 10 minutes away from the first property, which is in Portsmouth, Virginia. And then I can keep going if you want. I don't know how much more you want me to get into my story. I can keep going along if you want.
Well, that is a fascinating story and tells us a lot about you and your drive and your ambition and your willingness really to actually just put yourself out there and take risks and chances. Actually, I started out the same way you started out with house hacking. It wasn't called that at the time that I was doing that. But that's exactly what I did, and I think that's a really excellent way to get started. The property I started in was not built in 1900. It was built in 1979, and actually, at the time I bought it, it was still in really reasonably good condition. But it was a single-family home, and I had to convert it. I converted it to a triplex. And I did most of the work myself. Too at that particular time. A lot of work, a lot of lessons learned actually, and actually getting in there and actually doing those renovations. You learn a lot about what's hidden, what's behind all those walls and all of those things like that. So it's a good way to start out. It's a low risk way to get your foot in the door. So yeah, I think that's great. But you branched out from there and doing an excellent job here. But let's talk a little bit here about, it's great that things are going good for you, but life just is just not a bowl of cherries. Life comes at us in all kinds of different ways and different directions. So if you can think back through your life, and this may be within your real estate career, or it may be preceding that, but can you think of a time in your life when you had a big major setback or a big disappointment in your life? What was that, and tell us about what some of the things were that you went through in conjunction with
that. Sure. So I'll start with the real estate one, and it's turned around now, so I don't really view it as a failure as much, as because we definitely learned a lot from it. But when we first bought this triplex in Portsmouth, it was essentially a turnkey property. It had been flipped recently, and the seller was going to just burr it. Essentially, he was going to buy it, renovate it, and then rent it out, and then refinance eventually down the line. But for some reason, he wanted his money out of it, and he ended up selling it to us. And when I first looked at the property, I looked at it online, and I was looking at the price of it, and it's like, oh man, based on what I could get for rents for this, this is a really good deal. And that's at least what I thought looking at it online. So when we actually went to go tour the property, the property on the outside it's pretty solid. Like, it was brand new siding, brand new roof. I mean, it was pretty much brand new everything. And when you walked in, you guys definitely got that feel too. Like, it was very homey, right? But the closer you looked into it, you could tell where they were where the seller shortchanged some of the repairs that were done. And he was a Class A contractor, so he had all of his own guys do it. But some of the places we could stick.
He knew how to do it, but he didn't do it, huh?
Sorry, go ahead.
He knew how to do it, but he didn't do it right. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of corners cut, and the more we looked into it, the more we kind of found that. So, for example, the floor in the kitchen, on almost all the kitchens, was sloping towards the back of the house, and all of the units were lined up the same way. So when you first walked in, it was a living room, bedroom off to the side, and the kitchen was in the back of the property. Mm-hmm. And so all the kitchens were leaning, like sloping floors to the back. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't really think too much about that at the time. I was like, okay, like it's probably just a house settling. Well, turns out that we should have looked into it more, because we had pretty extensive termite damage underneath the property. And we didn't know that until termite swarming season came around about this time last year, and all the termites started coming out, and we could see them coming out of all these different places. And we had gotten a termite treatment done already for that year, but this was January time frame. It was very cold. It was, they were underground essentially. Right. And so when we went in there, when we started looking at all this termite damage, we started pulling out insulation here and there, and just the extent of it, of how bad it was really kind of seen. And we ended up spending about $5,000 on repairs, just repairs from all the termite damage, and another, I think $1,500 on termite treatment at that time. So that was one issue. A couple other issues is right when we first bought the house, or closed on the triplex, within 2 weeks, it got broken into, and all of the appliances and all the air conditioning units were stolen. Wow. And they tried to take the washers, or the water heaters too, but they were too heavy. So we essentially had a brand new property, brand new air conditioners, brand new stoves and washers and dryers and refrigerators, like pretty nice appliances. And all that was gone within, the first 2 weeks of owning this property. And that cost us about $13,000. And luckily insurance covered everything, but it cost us about $13,000 to get all the new appliances again, to get all the repairs done, to install the new air conditioning systems. And we're still having issues with the air conditioning systems and fuses being blown due to all the damage that they did when they cut the lines. Wow. And so it luckily, it hadn't been a couple of weeks more, because insurance wouldn't have covered it, because it would have been vacant for at least a month. And so, we were very lucky in that insurance covered a lot of that. But I mean, there's still heartache with the fact that, the appliances, I put a lot of time and effort to not only buying the appliances, but getting them over there, myself, and installing them myself. And, putting up the fence that they broke down to get to these units. And so long story short, the property was very much a headache. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of great lessons learned from that. And we used those lessons learned in another property a few months later. It was a 32 unit that we were looking at. And, it looked like a great deal on paper. But then when I went to go physically look at it and do the inspection, I had a lot of these same red flags that were going off in my head that I had with the triplex. And so I'm glad that I was able to make, $1,000 or so mistakes with the triplex, because it saved me a lot of, potentially $10,000, $100,000 mistakes with a 34, or 32, or even 100 unit property. So, I think for a beginning investor, having that experience with something smaller and kind of getting your confidence up and getting those lessons learned kind of, I would say out of the way, but getting them kind of built up and a callus built up, where you're able to recover if something happens, I think is very, very important for a first-time investor. So that was our experience with the triplex, and and it's a good story, right, to tell about the experiences that we had with that property.
Yeah, it certainly is, and that's good advice, and a good way to start is with that house hacking. You can make mistakes and recover from them, and the setbacks and tragedies are minimized to what, of course, they could be with a much larger property.
Absolutely.
So wonderful story, Anthony. Could you share with me for a moment here, what is your purpose in life? What is your what's your highest source of meaning in life?
Yeah, so I think that my aspirations in life and really where I get passion from
Mm-hmm.
is not so much the real estate itself. And I kind of came to this realization when we closed on a 104 unit property about a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt kind of a sense of completion, but almost like sadness that it was over. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't more of a sense of accomplishment. And I think it really made me kind of reassess why I'm doing this in the first place. And it
Mm-hmm.
kind of came to the realization that, what do I actually enjoy about real estate? Well, I enjoy telling my story. I enjoy helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy helping new beginners, kind of work through their own experiences, right? I like talking about what I've been through and how they can learn from that and how they can get started. And so I think that's really where my passions kind of lie is really kind of telling my story, because I really enjoyed that part of it, right? Because I like to help people move forward, right? Learn from my mistakes. And it's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing with the Navy. They always teach us to train your replacements
Mm-hmm.
and train your subordinates essentially to replace you, because you're only going to be there in any given job 2 to 3 years at a time, right? So
Right.
someone eventually needs to replace you. And if you have any sort of allegiance or I guess dedication to the organization in which you're a part of, you want it to succeed, right? You want it to be better than it was before under you. So you're always trying to find that person that can replace you. And I think that's what I've kind of taken on board with real estate is I want to help those individuals become become the person that I am, right? And be even
Mm-hmm.
better, right? To learn from my mistakes. And I think that's really important, in real estate or business in general, is finding a mentor that can provide you those lessons learned, right? Without you having to pay costly mistakes, or it's going to cost you, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000,
Right.
and potentially even ruin your whole experience with real estate or your business. So I
Or
think
your
that's really where
life.
my
Yeah.
my
So that's a wonderful purpose and meaning. Always there to make life better for people and thus better for the planet and everybody. Uh, that's uh, that's a great place to be, a great person to be. Anthony, I've got one last question here, but before I ask that question, could you share with our listeners today how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. So we have a lot of different, I guess, media methods you can find us. We have an Instagram page, a Facebook page, Pinto Capital Investments. We also have a Facebook group called Adding Value Through Multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
We have a website, pintocapitalinvestments.com, where you can see all about my story. We have a blog on there as well as our podcast, The Lessons in Real Estate Show, where I talk with industry experts in multifamily and commercial real estate about their pathway, their lessons learned on their pathways to success. And those are really the main ways. We also have a YouTube channel, Pinto Capital Investments. It's all centered around Pinto Capital Investments. If you just Google that, you'll find most of our content.
Okay.
Good way to
And
contact us.
okay, and we'll have Anthony's information in our show notes as well. So, Anthony, my last question is, how would you like your epitaph to read?
I would like it to say this quote. I would like to say, "Slow success builds character. Fast success builds ego." It's a quote I came across about 3 months ago, and
Mm-hmm.
it really kind of resonated with me. Especially as a relatively new investor,
Mm-hmm.
because I see a lot of people that are trying to use real estate investing as a way to get rich quick.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the type of people that are willing to take risks that, the more wiser individuals are not willing to
I'm not
take.
going to do.
Right.
Right.
And especially during this time, you're going to see a lot of those people kind of come out of the woodworks that are going to say, oh, there's going to be a lot of great deals. I'm going to start throwing cash at this, and really kind of deviate from their numbers. Right.
Right.
So, this business in general just takes time. You're
Right.
not going to be an overnight success. That is very rare that happens. Look at the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs, and the Elon Musk and even Jeff Bezos.
Mm-hmm.
That building Amazon took years.
Right.
He started that company in the 1990s, and
Right.
it took 10, 15, 20 years for that to become a reality of what it is now.
Sure.
And so I think it really behooves the first time investor and really the experienced investor to think about the fact that there's something to be said for building a career rather than building, riches for yourself, right? It's something to build an empire over time than to build a chance to get rich and have a lot of money, right? I think building the infrastructure and having that slow build gives you a lot more, backbone to be able to talk from a place of wisdom and experience than, making $1 million in 2 months and kind of resting on your laurels for the rest of your life. So that's what I like to live my life and think about when I'm like, oh man, this guy got, these many units, or man, this guy is going to travel to this place. And I think about, okay, like I can't compare my chapter 3 to their chapter 20. Right? We're on a completely different book almost. So that's what I like to live like. So slow success builds character, fast success builds ego.
Well, a wonderful epitaph, and it looks like you're living your life to end it without regrets. So
Absolutely.
Anthony, it has been a wonderful pleasure visiting with you today. And I hope that we can have future conversations thank you for being on the show today, Anthony.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Thank you for tuning in to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. Steed Talker Capital works with both new and established investors nationwide, creating opportunities to flourish in all areas of life. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. For resources to enhance your well-being through multifamily real estate investment, connect with us online at capital.steedtalker.com.